When you detach, the first thing that disappears is not attraction, not communication, and not even connection. It's emotional safety. Before your detachment, she knew where she stood with you. She knew your attention was available, your emotions were accessible, and your presence was predictable. Even if she wasn't fully invested, that certainty made her comfortable. Comfort, however, is not the same as desire. And when comfort is removed, emotions wake up. Your detachment doesn't come across as punishment or rejection when it's done correctly. It comes across as absence, and absence creates a psychological vacuum. She no longer feels anchored by your consistency. She no longer feels secure in knowing that you'll always be there, no matter how little effort she gives. That sudden loss of emotional safety forces her to confront a question she hadn't needed to ask before. What if I actually lose him? This is where regret begins, not in pain, but in awareness. She starts replaying moments when she pulled away, delayed replies, tested your patience, or assumed you'd stay regardless. Those moments didn't seem significant when your presence felt guaranteed. But now, without your emotional availability reinforcing her sense of security, those memories take on new weight. Regret doesn't come from what she lost. It comes from realizing she misjudged the value of what she had. Most men misunderstand this phase and try to accelerate it. They reappear too quick. They check in. They offer reassurance. And in doing so, they restore the very emotional safety that needs to remain absent for regret to grow. Detachment only works when it's genuine, not as a tactic, but as a natural shift away from over investment. You're not withdrawing to provoke emotion. You're stepping back because you respect yourself. As emotional safety fades, she becomes more alert. She notices your absence in ways she never noticed your presence, the texts that aren't coming, the validation that isn't offered, the emotional warmth that isn't available on demand. This absence creates emotional contrast, and contrast is what makes feelings visible. Without contrast, everything blends together and feels replaceable. This is also when fear enters the picture, but not fear in a dramatic sense. It's subtle, it's quiet. It's the fear of having taken something for granted, and that fear triggers reflection rather than reaction. She doesn't immediately reach out, she observes, she waits, she wonders. And in that space, regret begins to take form. What's important is that your detachment remains calm and dignified. There's no bitterness and no silent protest, no emotional withdrawal designed to hurt her. It's simply you choosing not to overextend where reciprocity is missing. That maturity is felt even if it's not consciously recognized. Eventually, emotional safety either gets replaced by desire or disappears entirely. If desire emerges, she leans in. If it doesn't, she fades. Either outcome is clarity. And clarity is far more valuable than forced connection. Because real regret only appears when emotional safety is gone and desire has to stand on its own. When you detach, nothing you say is what creates regret. In fact, words often delay it. Regret doesn't come from explanations, closure talks, or emotional conversations. It comes from silence that allows space for reflection. When you stop engaging, stop clarifying, and stop trying to be understood, her mind finally has room to replay what happened without your voice guiding the narrative. Before your detachment, her emotional experience was shaped by interaction. If she felt uncertain, she could reach out. If she felt distance, she could test you. If she felt guilty or reassurance, would soften it. Conversation acted as a buffer between her actions and their emotional consequences. Detachment removes that buffer. And without it, reflection becomes unavoidable. In the quiet, she begins revisiting moments that didn't seem important at the time. The times she pulled away emotionally, the times she delayed responding, the times she assumed you'd stay no matter what. These memories return not as accusations, but as questions. Why did I do that? What was I thinking? Did I misread him? Reflection is not about blame, it's about self awareness. Most men sabotage this process by re entering too soon. They send a message just to check in. They reopen conversation to gain clarity. They try to resolve the tension they feel inside, but by doing that, they replace reflection with interaction. They give her something external to focus on instead of letting her mind turn inward, and regret can't grow when it's constantly interrupted. Detachment allows time to stretch. Days feel longer, silence feels heavier, and in that space, emotions gain volume. She starts noticing the absence more clearly than she ever noticed the presence. The emotional contrast becomes sharp. What once felt familiar now feels distant. What once felt optional now feels uncertain. This is also where imagination takes over. Without updates from you, her mind fills in the blanks. She wonders what you're doing, who you're spending time with, whether you've emotionally moved on. And the mind always fills silence with meaning. Often, that meaning amplifies loss rather than softens it. Reflection also forces her to confront responsibility when there's no conversation to hide behind, no explanations to lean on. She has to face her own choices, and that's uncomfortable. But discomfort is the birthplace of regret, not because she feels attacked, because she feels aware. What's critical is that your silence isn't used as leverage. You're not withholding communication to provoke guilt. You're simply no longer over explaining yourself. You're letting reality speak. That authenticity is what gives your detachment weight. It feels final, not performative. Over time, reflection either deepens into regret or fades into acceptance. If regret grows, she reaches out with intention, not confusion. If it doesn't, she lets go. Either way, the outcome is real because regret doesn't come from what you say. It comes from what she realizes when you stop speaking, when you detach, the emotional roles quietly reverse. Before, you were the one seeking clarity, consistency, or reassurance. You were the one leaning in emotionally, trying to understand where things stood. Even if you didn't say it directly, your energy communicated availability. And availability, when unbalanced, shifts emotional polarity. The one who wants less holds the power. Detachment flips that equation. The moment you stop chasing emotional certainty, the pressure transfers. She becomes the one feeling the distance. She becomes the one sensing the shift. And because she's no longer being pursued emotionally, she begins questioning her position instead of yours. That reversal is subtle, but it's deeply felt. Emotional polarity isn't about control or manipulation, it's about momentum. Whoever is moving toward the other carries vulnerability. When you stop moving forward emotionally, you stop bleeding energy. That stillness creates gravity. She starts feeling pulled toward the space you no longer fill. Before detachment, she may have been comfortable letting you carry the emotional weight. She could take time, hesitate, or remain unsure because she knew you were holding the connection together. But when you release that role, she feels the weight drop, and suddenly the connection feels fragile, not because you threatened it, but because you stopped stabilizing it alone. This is when emotional awareness intensifies for her. She starts noticing how much effort she was or wasn't putting in. She starts noticing the imbalance. An imbalance, once visible, can't be ignored. That realization often comes with a quiet discomfort because it exposes the possibility that she may lose something she assumed would remain. Most men disrupt this reversal by re engaging emotionally the moment they sense distance. They fear the silence, they fear being forgotten, and in trying to reclaim connection, they unknowingly reclaim the chasing role. That instantly restores the old dynamic and erases the polarity shift. True detachment means you allow the reversal to complete itself. You don't rush in to relieve her discomfort. You don't soften your stance to make things easier. You remain open but not pursuing, present but not present. That emotional neutrality gives her room to step forward if she chooses. This is also where respect begins to grow. When you don't chase, you signal self worth. You demonstrate that connection is something you participate in, not something you beg for. That shift in energy is felt even if it's never consciously labeled, and respect is the foundation of attraction and regret alike. As emotional polarity reverses, she may feel the urge to re-establish balance. That can show up as a message, a question, or an attempt to reconnect, not because she's afraid of losing you, but because she feels the imbalance and wants to resolve it. And how she resolves it reveals everything. If she moves toward you, regret has already begun forming. If she stays distant, the connection wasn't rooted in mutual desire to begin with. Either way, the reversal has done its job because once you stop chasing emotionally, you stop giving away power, and the truth has room to surface. When you detach, your presence becomes scarce, and scarcity changes perception instantly. Before, your attention, effort, and emotional availability were consistent. Even if she appreciated them, they were expected. And anything that feels expected slowly loses its perceived value. Detachment removes that expectation. What was once reliable becomes uncertain, and uncertainty forces revaluation. Scarcity doesn't mean disappearing completely or acting unavailable on purpose. It means your energy is no longer always accessible. You're no longer the one filling silence, initiating contact, or smoothing over emotional distance. And when that access is reduced, her mind begins to assign value differently. She starts noticing what's missing rather than what's present. This is where regret starts forming quietly, not because she suddenly realizes she loves you, but because she realizes your presence is no longer guaranteed. The emotional safety net she relied on is gone. And without that net, every past interaction takes on new meaning. Moments she once brushed off now feel significant. Effort she didn't match now feels costly. Human psychology is wired to value what's scarce. When something is always available, we assume it will remain so. When availability is uncertain, attention sharpens. Desire awakens. Detachment creates that uncertainty without confrontation. You don't have to explain your worth. Scarcity does it for you. Most men try to create value by doing more communication, more effort, more reassurance. But value isn't created by excess, it's created by selectivity. When you choose where to invest your time and energy, you signal self respect, and self respect is magnetic. As scarcity sets in, she may begin comparing you to others, and this comparison doesn't favor the men who overgive, it favors the man who knows when to step back. She notices how different your energy feels now, how your attention carries weight, how your silence feels intentional rather than needy. That contrast is what makes regret grow. This is also when imagination fills the gaps. She wonders if you've moved on, if someone else is receiving the energy she once had access to. And imagination is powerful. It amplifies loss more than reality ever could. Not because you're doing anything to provoke jealousy, but because your absence invites speculation. What's important is that you don't weaponize scarcity. You don't disappear to punish. You don't withdraw to be noticed. You detach because you're no longer willing to invest where reciprocity is missing. That authenticity is what makes the scarcity feel real rather than strategic. Over time, scarcity either restores attraction or exposes indifference. If she feels regret, she moves toward you to regain access. If she doesn't, she lets the distance remain. And in both cases, you gain clarity because when your presence becomes scarce, its true value is finally revealed. When you detach, regret doesn't appear immediately. It shows up the moment she realizes your effort is no longer guaranteed. Before, even if she was inconsistent, distant, or unsure, she could rely on one thing: your attention would still be there. Your messages, your availability, your emotional openness created a safety net that required nothing from her. Detachment removes that net. The loss of guaranteed effort hits deeper than the loss of words or presence. Words can be replaced, conversations can resume, but effort, once withdrawn, forces a revaluation. She begins to understand that connection isn't sustained by interest alone, but by participation. And when participation is no longer one sided, the imbalance becomes impossible to ignore. This is where many men get confused. They think regret comes from missing them, but missing someone is emotional. Regret is psychological. It's the realization that an opportunity was mishandled. And that realization only happens when the opportunity is no longer easily accessible. When she notices that you're no longer initiating, no longer chasing clarity, no longer compensating for emotional distance, something clicks. The dynamic has changed. The effort she once assumed was automatic now feels conditional, not because you set conditions, but because you set boundaries. This creates a moment of internal conflict for her. Part of her wants the comfort of the old dynamic. Another part recognizes that comfort came at your expense, that tension is uncomfortable, and discomfort drives awareness. She starts asking herself whether she values the connection enough to step forward. Most men interrupt this realization by stepping back in too soon. They fear being forgotten. They fear the connection slipping away. And by reintroducing effort prematurely, they restore the imbalance. The message becomes, I'll always carry this, no matter what. And regret fades because effort feels safe again. True detachment allows the weight of lost effort to settle. It allows her to feel the absence of what you used to provide emotionally. And that absence is loud. It highlights the gap between what was and what is. And gaps create longing not for attention, but for the dynamic itself. If regret is genuine, it leads to action, not dramatic apologies or emotional confessions, but increased consistency, clearer communication, a willingness to meet you where you are. Effort begins to flow both ways. And when effort becomes mutual, connection becomes stable. If regret doesn't form, she drifts, not because you failed, but because the connection was never rooted in reciprocity. And that realization protects you from future disappointment. The key is that you don't demand effort. You don't ask for it. You don't explain its absence. You simply stop over giving. And in doing so, you let reality reveal itself. Because regret is born when effort is no longer guaranteed and choice replaces comfort. When you detach, the final outcome becomes clear without confrontation, explanation, or force. Detachment doesn't chase answers, it reveals them. At this stage, her response or lack of it tells you everything you need to know about her true desire. Not what she says, not what she promises, but what she chooses to do when access to you is no longer automatic. If her regret is real, it shows up in movement. She reaches out with intention. She engages with clarity instead of ambiguity. She stops testing and starts investing. This doesn't mean emotional speeches or dramatic gestures. It means consistency, presence, a willingness to meet you emotionally rather than keep you at a distance. Regret that doesn't lead to action isn't regret, it's nostalgia. Many men get trapped at this stage because they mistake curiosity for commitment. A message here, a reaction there, that's not movement, that's probing. True regret closes distance, it doesn't hover around it. And when you stay detached, you allow that difference to become obvious. If she doesn't move toward you, detachment becomes your protection. It prevents you from clinging to potential or hope. It removes the emotional fog that keeps men stuck in cycles of overinvestment. And while that clarity can be painful at first, it's far less painful than prolonged uncertainty. What's powerful here is that you don't need to decide anything. You don't need to walk away dramatically or announce your boundaries. Her behavior decides for you. Detachment turns the connection into a mirror. What she sees and what she does reflects her true level of desire. This is also where self respect solidifies. You realize that your value doesn't increase when someone regrets losing you. Your value is always there. Detachment simply stopped you from discounting it. And when you stop discounting yourself, the people who can't meet you naturally fall away. If she returns with real intention, the dynamic is different. It's not built on chasing or proving, it's built on choice. And choice creates balance, it creates mutual effort, it creates a foundation where connection can actually grow. If she doesn't, you walk forward without resentment, no bitterness, no need for closure. Just understanding you didn't lose anything real. You released something incomplete. Detachment doesn't guarantee regret, it guarantees truth. And truth is what allows you to move forward with confidence, clarity, and self respect.